So let's get started. Hello, dear friends, and welcome to the 9th day of the Project Management Marathon. We are PMI Romania, the host of this event, and today we are pleased and honored to have a very special guest and a hot topic. It is about Scott Ambler, the co-creator of Discipline Agile, and today's topic is Discipline Agile Risk Management. Address risk, don't just manage it. Before starting, let me remind you the basic rules. The event will be recorded and will be accessible on YouTube. During the presentation, we prefer, most of us, to switch webcam and audio off. We have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please add your questions in the chat window. After Q&A, please send us your feedback by filling the survey, whose link will be provided in the chat window. Finally, today's guest will hand over the relay to the next day's speaker, and then we close the current session. As usual, we can stay a few more minutes for further conversations after the presentation ends. Thank you for your patience. I know you are eager to hear Scott, who is going to start right away. I wish you a very nice evening, and now I invite Valentin Mocanu, Agile and Discipline Agile coach and instructor, a true ambassador and strong promoter of Discipline Agile, to introduce today's speaker. Valentin, please take over the mic.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. We are happy to present you today Scott Ambler, Vice President and Chief Scientist of Discipline Agile at Project Management Institute. Scott Ambler is also the co-creator of Discipline Agile Toolkit and also creator of Agile Modeling and Agile Data Methods and author of several books, including Choose Your Way of Working, an executive guide to Discipline Agile, refactoring databases, and many others. Scott has always contributed to the development Agile community, with many of his works available online. I remember that from early 2000s, if I needed information about Agile process or Agile practices, I knew I would find something in Scott's work. This topic is related to addressing risk with the support of their toolkits. So Scott, please introduce this topic to us.
Okay, thank you very much. I will start sharing my slides and hopefully it starts out. Okay, so anyways, thank you very much, everyone, for taking time out of your busy days to attend this workshop, or attend this talk, I should say. So what I'd like to do is share some ideas and techniques from Discipline Agile, and for the most part, share some ideas, because this is a very deep topic, and I'm going to spend about an hour on it. So, we need to set our expectations accordingly, I guess. So as you heard, I'm one of the co-creators of the Discipline Agile Toolkit. You can reach me on both Twitter and on LinkedIn if you like, or via PMI as well. So I'm a fairly easy person to get a hold of if you are so interested. So anyways, what would I like to talk about? Well, first I'm going to talk about why addressing, I'm more interested in addressing risk as opposed to managing risk. And there's an important nuance there that I want to work through. Then I'll give you an overview of the DA toolkit, sort of set some basic ideas and set a foundation for discussion, and then I'll focus on addressing two levels of risk: risk at the team or project level, and risk at the enterprise level. And then we'll work through some parting thoughts, and then I'll take questions at the end. So, addressing risk. What am I getting at here? So, as PMI members, I hope you're familiar with the PMI standard for risk management. This is an incredible book, and this should be your starting point for risk management in my mind. This material, this slide is straight out of the book. the interesting thing about risk management is that from PMI's point of view, is that risks can both be opportunities and threats. We often think of risks as negative things, bad things, and certainly, certainly they can be, but they can also be opportunities. And I'll walk through some examples of that in a bit. The challenge sometimes, though, is that very often, the risks are both opportunities and threats. We very often look at it just in the negative point of view, but there's also the positive point of view too. And so we want to be smart about that. So we want to make sure we get the good stuff, the opportunities, and hopefully avoid or at least downplay the threats, the negative risks or negative aspect of a given risk is probably a better way of saying it. So according to the standard, risk management includes a bunch of activities, and I fully agree with this. And just been Agile, long before we were purchased by PMI, took a similar approach. We actually adopted a lot of great ideas from the various guides and standards from PMI to begin with. Hence the overlap in thinking. So risk management includes a lot of activities. So what's an interesting implication of this? So the challenge that I see is that when your goal is to manage risk, there's a significant chance that your effort will focus on what I would consider passive activities, the management aspects of risk management. The planning, the identification, the analysis, the monitoring. And these are all important things, don't get me wrong, but these things alone is useless bureaucracy. It's not until you actually address the risks that you actually, focus on the concrete activities. Can we, in the case of negative risks, can we pay them down? And in the case of positive risks, opportunities, can we increase them? Can we actually get more value out of them? So this is why in DA, we've always used the term address risk, not manage risk, because we want to make it very clear that the end goal here is to actually address these risks, not just paper over them. And it's interesting, and I would argue that if you read the PMI standard for risk management, it is very clear about that. But you would have to actually follow the advice, and that always doesn't happen. So I just want to make it a little, language counts. And so in DA, we prefer to be a little more concrete, be a little more active in our approach to risk. So one of the great things about one of many great things about the standard is that it's very clear that risk appears at multiple levels. Now I'm going to go a little bit beyond the standard in this case because DA had a, so one of the things, so let me back out of that conversation. So one of the interesting things to observe about DA and some of PMI's legacy, pre-DA materials is that we worked on different scopes. And so as a result, sometimes DA covers a wider range of a certain topic than traditional PMI documents did. And sometimes PMI covers, PMI artifacts covered a greater range of material and certainly greater depth in many cases than in DA. So there's always been a bit of a delta. I suspect there always will be. But both sides, not that there's really sides, but both sides are improving and learning from each other. So as we're integrating materials on both sides of the fence there, we're both improving. So anyways, in DA, we like to think of risk occurring at the individual level. You could have, risks associated with certain people. And the standard isn't completely clear, but it sort of implies this, but it doesn't really call it out directly. So there might be some opportunity for improvement there at some point. Certainly at the team project level, in DA, we prefer to use the term team rather than project because there's, as we'll see, there's different approaches to the way these teams can work. Sometimes they're project teams, sometimes they're non-project teams, and that's okay. Of course, the program level, the team of teams level, the portfolio level, and sometimes an organization can have multiple portfolios depending on how they're organized. Sometimes it's basically the entire enterprise, depending on your point of view, and that's okay. Of course, the entire enterprise level if you're in a multi-portfolio situation. And then also where I would argue that the existing standard doesn't go is ecosystem risk. What is the overall environmental risk that we face? And certainly some of that's implied by enterprise risk, because challenges outside of our organization will certainly, and opportunities outside of our organization will certainly have an effect on the enterprise itself. But I would I think there's value in calling these things out. So anyway, so I'm calling it out. So our focus today, though, having said all this, will be on the team level and on the enterprise level. And in DA, we make the argument that a program is just a really big team or team of teams. So, but there's certainly different issues that you'd be looking for at the program and portfolio level. But anyways, we're going to, the interesting stuff is at these two levels that I'm going to focus on is what I'm getting at. Okay, so what is Discipline Agile? Discipline Agile is a toolkit. It's not a framework. A lot of people at first think of DA as, oh, it's just a framework like SAFe or Scrum or whatever else. And that's simply not true. So, and the main difference is where a framework tells you what to do. It makes certain decisions for you. It's, they pitch themselves as collections of best practices. They solve a certain problem, which is great. If you have the problem that Scrum solves, then that's good. If you have the problem that SAFe solves, then it might be your solution. But what if you don't have those problems? Or what if your problem evolves over time, which it always does? So then you've got a problem. So DA helps you to understand what your options are, helps you to make decisions and to develop a fit for purpose approach, to tailor your way of working to meet your situation. So instead of telling you what to do, instead of saying, well, this is the best way, this is the best practice, we instead give you options, because there's no such thing as best practices. That's marketing. What you really want is the best fit approach for the situation that you face. And because you're a unique person on a unique team working for your unique organization, facing a unique problem, you need to tailor your approach to meet the needs of your situation. And as your situation evolves, you need to evolve your way of working. So we want to have a fit for purpose way of working, not just the official framework way of working. So it's a much different value proposition. So Discipline Agile is an umbrella over a wide range of techniques, agile techniques, lean techniques, even traditional techniques. So in many ways, the name Discipline Agile is wrong because it's really a hybrid. It's not just agile. It's not just about being agile. It's about being effective and becoming a learning organization. So what we do is we put hundreds and probably thousands now of practices and strategies into context. And then we help you to make better decisions to choose the right way of working for your situation. So in many ways, Discipline Agile is like a pantry or a market with all these ingredients. So when you go to make dinner tonight, you've got two choices, right? You can go to McDonald's and have the hamburger meal. And that's like adopting a framework, right? Here's the one best meal for everybody. We'll sell you a burger and fries and a Coke. Or you could be a little more healthy, and you could make a dinner for yourself and pull ingredients off the shelf and whip up something for dinner. So that's the difference, right? So we're helping you to have a healthier process, a more appropriate process for you. And yes, it is a bit harder to make your own dinner than it is to walk down the street and go to McDonald's. Okay, so what level of sophistication are you at would be one thing to think about. So I said this before, I'll say it again, there are no best practices. So for example, a framework might tell you, say for Scrum or whatever, might tell you, here's the one best practice for funding an Agile project team, time and materials, more than likely, right? All the Agile coaches are constantly talking about time and materials, and that's a great technique, don't get me wrong. But there's other ways, we know this, right? We know there's different ways we can fund projects. Why not choose the strategy that makes the best sense for you? And there's a little more to funding a project team or funding an endeavor than just just the funding strategy itself. It's like, what are we funding? What's the scope? How are we going to go about getting the funds? Do we have to have a formal review process? Is it an onerous process to get money out of the finance folks, or is it fairly straightforward? Right? Tell me a good story. Okay, here's your money. Go forward. And I've seen a full range of all that. Right? So, and that's okay. So what we do is, instead of telling you, time materials is the one best way of working, what we do instead, we say, you need to think about these things. There's these 3 issues that you really should consider. And here's a bunch of options. You choose the right strategy for you in the situation that you face. And then over time, maybe you can improve and learn and try other techniques and work your way up these lists until finally, you really are functioning at a very effective way. But right now, you might not be capable of doing some of the harder techniques or some of the more effective techniques. So what you should strive to do is do the best that you can in the situation that you face and always try to get better. So in the DA toolkit, we help you do that. And this is true of risk management as well, of course. So in DA, Agilists in general will tell you, it's about the mindset. It's about being agile, not just doing agile. I personally believe, and my experience is, it's both, right? We have to have an agile mindset. We have to know what it means to be agile. But if we don't know how to do agile, we're still not going to get the job done, right? So we really need both mindset and process. So anyways, mindset's a good place to start, though. So the DA mindset originally was based on the original Agile Manifesto for software development, and that was great, 20 years ago. But over time, we started to evolve the manifesto. And for many years, we had something that we called the Discipline Agile Manifesto, which was based on the original Agile Manifesto. But then about 2 years ago, we realized that it was really clunky, that it really wasn't getting the job done. And it's actually interesting. In February, it was the 20th anniversary of the writing of the Agile Manifesto. And there was a worldwide festival celebrating that. And there was many sessions on, can we improve the manifesto? Can we extend it? What have we learned in 20 years was basically the question. And I'm not sure any of that discussion went anywhere. It was interesting, but I'm not sure it went anywhere because there's some challenges with trying to extend the manifesto. So anyways, about 2 years ago, we stepped back and we asked the question, well, if we were to write the manifesto from scratch, knowing what we've learned in the last 18 years at the time, and focusing on business agility rather than just software agility, well, how would we capture it? And it was a bit of work, but this is what we came up with. So instead of describing, the mindset in terms of values and principles, which was a wonderful way of doing it 20 years ago, we instead decided, what? Let's start with principles. So we believe in this collection of principles. And because we believe in these principles, we make promises both to ourselves and to the people that we work with that this is how we're going to behave. These are the types of things that we're going to do. And then in order to fulfill these promises, we follow a collection of guidelines. And what's interesting is that some portions of this mindset are, pro risk or are very pertinent to risk. So for example, two of the principles, context counts. So first of all, the way that you approach risk and addressing risk and even identifying risks will depend on your situation. What is your risk tolerance, for example? What types of risks or what level of risk can you live with? What do you even perceive as being risky as opposed to not risky? Being enterprise aware, looking past the project team, which is interesting for Agilists because Agile originally was all about the team. How can we make our teams effective, which was a great thing. In many ways, project management is also about the team or about the project in this case. So you have this, both Agile and project management has this scope of what they perceive to be important. And fair enough, right? That's the scope, and that's what we want to focus on. In DA, we make it clear, well, wait a minute, yeah, that's nice, but we really need to be concerned, at least concerned about the enterprise, and better yet, about our customers that we're trying to serve. So we talk about being enterprise aware. let's work and act in a way that makes sense for our overall organization, not just what's convenient for the team. So when we have a team that is making relatively risky decisions, it might be great for them, might be very convenient for them, but has some unfortunate side effects for the rest of the organization. We got to talk about that, and we darn well better govern that effectively. So one of the ways we do that is we make our work and our workflow visible. I can't govern if I don't know what's going on, right? We can't do risk management, or we can't address risk at higher levels, at the program, at the portfolio, at the enterprise level, if we don't know what's going on at the lower levels below us, right? So we have to have visibility, hopefully in real time. And of course, we should take a validated learning approach. We should be experimenting and measuring and trying to identify what actually works in practice as opposed to what we hope would work. We should be applying design thinking, and we should attend to relationships through the value stream. We should be optimizing the way that we work across the entire organization and thereby reduce risk. So the point I want to make is in the mindset, the DA mindset itself puts us in a better position to address risk and to explicitly address risk than what we see just in some of the mainstream Agile frameworks. And that's okay. So what is the scope of Discipline Agile? So Discipline Agile focuses on business agility. I mentioned this earlier. It's not just about software development, and certainly software development is important, but it's not everything that your organization does. So we've architected the toolkit into 4 layers. The first one is the foundational layer. This is where the mindset is. This is where a lot of the fundamental concepts from Agile, Lean, and the traditional serial world exist. What are the roles and responsibilities, teams, and how do we choose our way of working? So this is all fundamental, foundational stuff that applies across the entire organization. Building upon that is the DevOps layer, the discipline DevOps layer. So how do we approach DevOps in an enterprise class manner? So it's not just about Agile software development anymore. It's really about DevOps, and it's not just about So classic DevOps is all about how do you get the software development team and the operations teams working together effectively, and merging them and all that good sort of stuff. And that's certainly important, but you'd better be doing it in a secure manner. You'd better be including data when you're doing all this sort of stuff. How do you do operations support and release management at scale? When I have like hundreds or thousands of teams in flight, you darn well better believe there's going to be some coordination of all that, and getting some reuse and common infrastructure and common standards and guidelines. So how are we going to govern all this? So anyway, Discipline Agile has a mature and robust approach to DevOps that your organizations can probably benefit from. Building upon DevOps are value streams. So how do we bring products and services to our customers? How do we, and continue on, how do we make money for our organization? In the case of government agencies, how do we serve our citizens? Building upon that is the Discipline Agile Enterprise. So what are the other functions and process areas within our organization that support the value streams? So these hexes are something that they represent something called process blades. Think of it as process areas, so different aspects of your overall organizational process. And of course, there may be a correlation as well to the organization structure as well. So not only do you have finance processes, but you probably also have a finance team. Okay, so that's what we're getting at. So what's the scope of the presentation today? Well, as I said, I'm going to focus on team level governance stuff, because that's where a lot of very good ideas are, and overall enterprise addressing risk at the enterprise level as well, which appears in the governance process blade. And like I said, I've chosen not to include portfolio addressing risk at the portfolio and program level, but those 2 process blades would address risk at that level as well. But it's very similar to what we see in the governance. There's a little bit of repetition there, basically. So how do we address risk at the team level? And it's interesting, addressing team risk is also there's an implication that you're also addressing risk at the individual level. So these mountain climbers here very clearly have individual risk. I'm sure none of them want to fall, nobody wants to fall to their death. But there's also some team risk here that if things go phenomenally poorly, the entire string of people could fall off this mountain. And that happens, by the way, when things go very, very poorly. So, or they'll all get hit by lightning or something. It's, climbing mountains is risky, apparently. I don't do it. So don't look to me for expertise. So team level risk. So let's go through some examples. And earlier, remember how I mentioned that, in which we know from the standard, that risks can both be positive and negative. They can both be opportunities and threats. So let's work through some examples of some team level risks. So a common risk that you may have seen on your various teams, and you might be doing now actually, is this attitude that, we can, in order to be on time and on budget, we'll just cut quality now. We'll de-scope perhaps, or we'll take some shortcuts, but that's okay. We'll clean things up later. We'll fix our quality problems later. So there's an opportunity there. There's we can be on time and on budget, which might be a good thing. But there's also a threat that we increase the overall technical debt, at least in whatever it is that we're building, and within the enterprise as well. So here we have a team making a decision that could increase the overall risk of our organization in order to achieve the opportunity of being on time and on budget. Now, from a more of a business type of risk. So here we have a bank, and they're going to issue a mortgage at the branch. So where somebody goes into a branch and asks, they want to borrow money to buy a house. Unfortunately, this couple just barely meets their criteria, but the bank manager decides to give them the loan anyways, because he needs to make his quarter. Like he's got certain objectives to make for the quarter, and this will help him do that. So he's going to reach his goal for the quarter. So this is a good thing. But now we're taking on the risk. There's this threat that we're going to lose money if this couple can't pay the bills, can't pay the mortgage payments. Another risk another activity. So we might choose to hire people on our team. So say we're at the beginning of a project and we're putting a team together, and I'm short a few people. Well, we have this one provider, this one HR company that we can hire. We have a contract with them. We can easily hire their people, which is great, right? So very easy for me to go to this company and hire some contractors from them. But there's other companies, companies just like them that we don't have agreements with, so I can't work with them easily, right? So I go to this one company, the HR for us, or whatever the company's name is, and I can get people very easily. So that's convenient for me. But by doing that, I might miss out on better people, because there's other companies out there that I could also hire contractors from, and they've probably got some very good people, but I don't have easy access to them. So we're taking on a risk there. Then everybody on the team uses this, the same corporate standard laptops. They're all a certain vendor, certain operating system, all this stuff. So we end up with consistent configurations. So when we do run into problems, or when we're helping each other learn how to use software, everybody's laptop looks the same for the most part, and it's pretty easy to help everybody else out because you know what's going on. Unfortunately, we have a huge threat here. We have consistent problems as well. So if we have some standard software and it doesn't work well, everybody's got that problem. If we get hit by a virus, everybody gets hit, perhaps, right? So there's some potential downsides of having this standardized equipment. Certainly some upsides as well. Finally, another risk, we choose to work with in a just-in-time lean manner with our suppliers, right? We have a lean supply chain. This is a great way to reduce inventory carrying costs, to have the best available at the time. But if our suppliers are unable to deliver, it could cause our entire factory to shut down because we're short a part, right? Because we have little or no inventory. So one shipment gets made for whatever reason, or it's late, then we've got a problem. So anyways, there's, we have these risks. There's, in this case, they're all either, I picked them purposely to have both obvious, obvious opportunities, obvious threats as well. So how do we address, risk at the team level? Now, interestingly enough, we actually have a process goal, and I'll explain what a process goal is in a bit, called address risk. So actually, if you remember earlier, I used an example of securing funding. So that diagram that I showed is what we call a goal diagram. So in behind each of these bubbles is a goal diagram and the options behind them. So there's two process goals in DA that directly apply to risk. The address risk process goal, obvious, and governing governing the team as well. But there's also some goals that are really do also help to address explicitly address risk. Early in a project, during inception, or the project initiation phase, whatever you want to call that, or sprint zero if you're still doing Scrum. One of the goals is to develop a common vision. This helps to pay down business risk because we all agree to go in the same direction. We all agree to what we're trying to achieve here. We agree to a rough plan and to the architecture and to the what the scope is of the effort. Early in construction, we should prove the architecture, particularly if we're building something new. We should prove the architecture early. This is all about paying down technical risk. And then before we go to release something, before we release it into the marketplace or into operations, we should ensure we're actually ready to release. We should test effectively. Some fairly straightforward stuff. And that's about paying down technical risk and business risk as well, right? The quality risk. So anyway, so there's many opportunities where we've built risk, addressing risk right into the toolkit. But let's focus on the two explicit ones. This is the up and coming version of the address risk goal diagrams. This is a future version. We'll be releasing it soon. I don't have an exact date, so I won't give you one. But anyways, we're about to release it soon. So it's like everything else, the toolkit evolves, and it's all about addressing risk. So once again, the way you read these goal diagrams, the square rectangles are what we call decision points or process decision points or intents. These are things you need to think about. So how are we going to go about identifying risks? How are we going to go about categorizing risks? How do we identify what we call compound risks or aggregate risks? So, because what happens is, as you go up, if you remember the risk levels of, individual and team and program and so on, risks start to add up. So what is an acceptable risk for a single team might end up adding up across teams to being an unacceptable risk at the program level, for example, right? So how do we go about aggregating those risks? And some risks appear very, when you look at them on their individually, appear very small and manageable. But then when you actually look at the dependencies between risks, you realize you have one event could have a cascading effect and could trigger many problems for you all at once. So you got to be smart about that as well, right? So what are the dependent risks, and we got to make sure we don't do that. So any of you from an insurance or particularly a reinsurance background will appreciate that, particularly a reinsurance background, and so on. So how are we? So what are these issues that we're going to face? And then for each of these decision points, these issues, what are our options? So, there's different ways that we can classify and score risks. There's different ways that we can address opportunities, different ways we can address threats, and so on. So in DA, we give you options. The frameworks, on the other hand, so any given framework would more than likely make decisions for you. So they'll make one or two choices in each of these, for each of these decision points, and probably not even tell you about any of the rest, right? They'll effectively redact your options for you, which is good and bad. This is the team level, the governed team decision point. We're in the process goal. We're in the process of renaming this to governed team. It used to be called governed delivery team. So when we release this, it'll get released under a new name. So my apologies for any confusion that may cause. And there's two risk things here that are critical. First, providing transparency. And I mentioned this earlier, that in order to aggregate risks up the, between levels, the lower levels need to provide transparency, and then, to enable governance, to enable the, being able to make intelligent decisions. We need the information of, what's going on here, basically. That way we can, properly aggregate those risks and many other aspects of governance as well. The second decision point is around milestone reviews. So in DA, we build in milestones, and there's different ways you can go about doing milestone reviews. They can be very formal, they can be very lightweight. You can actually automate them. If you're familiar with DevOps, a lot of the DevOps stuff is automating the living heck out of everything. And I would argue that when many people have argued, it's not just me, that one of the secrets to DevOps is that they've automated what used to be formal reviews, or what used to be people reviewing things, and now they've fully automated those reviews. So they've dramatically increased the efficiency and accuracy and governability, by the way, and reduce risk all the while they're doing it. So the point is there's different ways to hold milestone reviews, and so we support those ways. It doesn't have to be a formal, onerous review process at all. So why am I mentioning that? Well, it's because milestone reviews provide explicit opportunities to verify that the risks are actually being addressed. It's arguably an aspect of transparency, but it's also a risk, a strategy to address risk as well, or at least to show that you're addressing risk, or not show that you're addressing risk, depending on the situation, I guess. Another thing that we support in DA are multiple life cycles. And so DA is based on pragmatism, and it's based on observation, on empiricism as well. So when you go into an organization, you will say, and let's assume this is pre-COVID, so we can still walk into the offices and stuff like that. But I would be able to walk into an office, and I just walk. Sometimes I wouldn't even have to talk to people. I could just walk through the office and say, oh, there's a sort of a Scrum type of a team over there. Oh, there's very obviously a Kanban type of a team over there. Oh, I'm not quite sure what they're doing. That's okay. But the point was that it was, and certainly by talking to them, I could, get a much better understanding of what's going on. But it was very easy to observe that different teams were working different ways. And that's okay, right? Let's choose to observe that. Let's enable teams to have a fit for purpose approach to the way that they work. Let them choose the best fit process for them, best fit life cycle for them, and thereby reduce the overall risk to the team. So in DA, we support, in this case, in discipline agile delivery, that one hex, we support 6 different life cycles. We support an agile project type of a life cycle. We support a continuous delivery agile life cycle, more of a DevOps type of a thing. Both of these are based on Scrum. We also support a lean project lifecycle and a continuous delivery lean lifecycle, more of a product type of a lifecycle or a DevOps type lifecycle, on a not project lifecycle. And those are both based on Kanban. The top 2 life cycles are project life cycles, and they have several phases. So a couple diagrams ago, summary of the goal of the process goals, we saw there was phases. Well, the project teams tend to have phases, but we also support product team life cycles in the DevOpsy type life cycle, or non-project life cycles. We have an exploratory life cycle. This is based on lean startup. This is where you do minimum viable products. You create experiments to run in the marketplace in order to reduce the risk of developing a product or service that the market doesn't want. So an MVP, a minimal viable product or minimal viable service, if you're developing a service, I guess, is an investment in paying down risk. It's an investment in experimentation or investment in learning. We want to learn what the market actually wants, not what we're guessing that it wants. So it's all about paying down risk. And we have a program life cycle as well. How do you do a team of teams? And so this is, if you're familiar with LESS, it's very familiar. It's very similar to the LESS approach, similar to what SAFE first got released as well, right? So how do we approach a team of teams? Although not as restrictive as either one of those, but how do you approach a team of teams with a discipline agile approach? So anyways, there's multiple life cycles, and the idea is let's enable teams to choose the best, a good starting point, the best approach for them, and thereby reduce their overall risk. Now, what's interesting I'll go back a slide. When we talk about supporting multiple life cycles and allowing teams to choose the best fit for them, best approach for them, sometimes leadership gets concerned. It's like, well, how are we going to govern? How are we going to manage these teams if they're not following the same approach? If we're not inflicting the same process on them. Well, this is why transparency and common milestones are so important. So in DA, we support a common set of risk-based milestones, not documentation-based, but risk-based. This provides common transparency. It provides a common set of milestone points where the leadership of your organization can still get the visibility and the insight into what's going on, and points where they can guide and lead in a consistent manner, yet still enable the teams to do their own thing, to work in the best approach possible for them. So allowing the teams to work in their own way reduces overall risk. Having a common set of risk-based, hopefully lightweight milestones also enables us to address risk effectively. So all this stuff is baked right into DA. So we've solved some fairly important challenges that your organization is probably struggling with when it comes to Agile, governance, risk management, and many other things. So that was the team level stuff. And I should actually point, I'm going to go back to these slides. Oh, no, it's a build slide. My apologies. Both the address risk, particularly the address risk process goal, is applicable at multiple levels, right? So we could be addressing risk at the program level, at the portfolio level, and these strategies, you'll do a slightly different flavor at the portfolio level than at a team level, of course, but it all still applies. I should have pointed that out, so my apologies. It's one of the reasons why I wasn't all that concerned about not going into a lot of detail when it came to portfolio and program risk stuff. Okay, so enterprise risk. The challenge with enterprise risk is as you go further up in the levels, a bunch of little risks, like a bunch of little fires, an individual little flame probably isn't much of a problem, right? It's easy to keep an eye on, easy to put out if if things start going poorly. But a bunch of little flames can suddenly turn into a really big bonfire, and then you've got a problem. And that's the challenge with enterprise risk. How do we aggregate these risks and deal with them accordingly? So anyway, we earlier we saw a bunch of team risks. All of them could either be opportunities or threats or both in reality. So how do these converge? So these team level decisions all make sense. I'm not saying that these are good or bad things. I'm just saying all those decisions make sense in the moment. But when we have multiple teams making similar decisions, all these little risks can add up to a really big problem. So this idea that, oh, on my project team, we're gonna cut quality now because I gotta hit my date. Okay, that makes sense. I'll give you that. But when all of my teams are doing that, suddenly I've got a very serious problem around technical debt in my organization, and this makes it difficult for us to innovate and to react to changes in the marketplace. Some of you might have worked for organizations a year or so ago when COVID hit. You really struggled to go virtual. And some of that struggle was technical debt. Maybe the infrastructure wasn't in place. Maybe you had some quality problems that made it really hard to change some of your business processes and really hard to change the way you're going to market. So the poor quality infrastructure or documentation or data or systems or whatever it is that you're doing, any sort of poor quality made it really hard to change quickly. Lending, having a questionable mortgage isn't such a big deal at the branch level, but if we do a lot of those and then suddenly there's a downturn in the marketplace, we can get in serious trouble. If you remember in 2008, when there was the mortgage crisis, it was basically because particularly in the United States, they were lending money, all the banks were lending money to people that really couldn't pay back loans. Suddenly the economy went down and all these loans went bad at once and we had a crisis. The individual loans were all, individually, okay, why not? Together, huge problem. It's easy to, hire from a single pre-approved service provider, but then suddenly we're reliant on that single vendor. And if that vendor gets into trouble, or if they run out of good people, which I know happens, or if you overwhelm them with requests, or if other customers of them overwhelm them and suddenly we're all looking for the same basic people, then we've got a problem, right? We've taken on a lot of risks that we didn't need to take on. When we have standard corporate laptops, well, if we get hit by a virus, suddenly everybody potentially gets hit by a virus. If we're doing just-in-time lean supply chains, that's great until there's a tsunami or a pandemic, or some clown blocks a canal somewhere in the world, and suddenly we can't get any shipments of materials, right? So we've got a problem. One problem can cause a significant supply disruption. If you remember back to the tsunami about 10 years ago, particularly Toyota had some very serious problems for a while because the tsunami hit many of the ports where their suppliers were working out of. So their supply chain was problematic for several quarters as a result of one tsunami. So things happen. So these small risks can add up. So at the enterprise level, we need to be prepared to address them accordingly. So this is built into the governance process goal in this case. So we have we explicitly address risk at the enterprise level. That's the level for governance. And as I said, there's similar stuff in the new versions for portfolio and program management as well. So I just want to point them out. Virtually identical, actually. So anyways, so it's built in here. So we really do want to govern our risk or address risk at this enterprise level. And it's all about dealing with these aggregate risks. And as well, and of course, keep an eye on the lower levels down as well, making sure that they're actually doing risk stuff is the issue. So anyways, just to wrap up here before I go to questions, how can you learn more? How can we learn more about Discipline Agile? Well, as I hope you know, we have several Agile certifications being offered by PMI. The blue and the orange ones are currently available now. Actually, DAVSC is also being taught now as well, and DAC will soon be available, I believe, in June or July timeframe. What are the differences? So I'm sure you're all familiar with ACP. It's been around for several years now. Been very successful. We will continue with ACP. It is not going anywhere. So if anybody's worried about that, you don't have to worry. We're not getting rid of ACP. The new certifications, though, that are focused on DA, that's probably what you might not know about. So there's the DASM, the Discipline Agile Scrum Master, and this is for people who are fairly new to Agile and maybe completely new to Agile. So it teaches you some fundamentals, and it's basically Scrum Plus. There's some initial work for you to do to learn about some of the Scrum ceremonies, but in the workshop, it's in the certification workshop itself, we focus on going beyond Scrum. So what does it mean to do we cover Scrum, of course, but what about Kanban? What about fundamental Agile and Lean strategies, and even some traditional strategies from other sources that you need to make your Agile project teams work in practice. So it's a very pragmatic certification. And what's interesting at that level, you learn about improvement at the individual and team level. So how can we get better as a professional? How can we be actively involved with improving our process at the team level? The Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master also goes far beyond Scrum, and its focus is on how do we do process improvement at the team level. How do we make agile work in the enterprise and enterprise class situations? And it goes beyond software development as well. So for those of you who are not in the software field but still want to learn how to be agile, both of these workshops, the focus is on, there is a little bit of software stuff in there, of course, but it's mostly focused on non-software examples and exercises and good things like that. There's the DAC, the Discipline Agile Coach, and the focus there, once again, it goes beyond just agile coaching, because the focus there is how do we help disparate teams work together. So I might be coaching, maybe I'm coaching, 2 or 3 teams, and then suddenly we've got this problem with finance. How are we going to fund our project? So we saw that earlier, right? Well, the challenge there, it's not just about my team deciding, well, we're going to do time materials. This is how we're going to be funded. Because the finance people say, no, we're not. We're going to do a fixed price, fixed bid traditional thing. That's our decision, not yours. Thanks for playing, right? So the DAC, a big focus of that is how do we help these 2 disparate teams, which have different levels of skill, different priorities, different mindsets, different focuses. How do we get them to work together and agree on, well, here's a new technique, this time materials thing that we can experiment with, and let's see if it works for us in our organization, right? So how do you negotiate that decision, and how do you facilitate that? And of course, and then, even worse, what happens when there's like 3 teams involved? So it's not only, finance, we also have to get the procurement folks involved, for whatever reason, right? So how do you do that as a coach? And because the challenge is, if you've been coaching software teams, you might be an awesome coach for software teams, but if you don't know anything about finance or anything about procurement, they're not going to listen to you. End of story on that one, right? You will not be able to get your job done because you can't speak coherently and coach coherently in those situations. So how do you apply the DA toolkit to help you to overcome those challenges? And then the DAVSC is all about, well, how do value streams work? How do we coach and consult at the enterprise level and ensure that the way that we're working, that our processes at these higher levels are effective, and how do we evolve them over time as we learn, as we get better? Because we will be constantly tweaking our process. And when we have many teams in any given value stream, you could have dozens of teams working together to, if you're at a large bank or any sort of large organization or involved in a complex value stream, you could have dozens of teams, maybe even several organizations working together. Well, how do we tune that process? How do we get all those groups working together effectively and learn and improve over time? And that's what the DAVSC certification teaches you to do. So there's a lot of great opportunity to work smarter, to learn how to work smarter, and as well as to become change makers within your organization, or in the case of consultants, at the organizations that you're consulting to at the time. So this slide goes into a summary of what I just talked about. By the way, on these slides, if you haven't already downloaded them, they will be available to you after this talk. So just to wrap up here before I go to questions. So I've hopefully convinced you it's not just about managing risk, it's about addressing it. And I want to be perfectly clear. The risk standard from PMI is pretty darn clear about this. I believe, if you read it and follow the advice. My concern, though, is I've seen many teams that have read it and then didn't really follow the advice as well as they could have. So in DA, this is one of several reasons why we took a little more aggressive approach, I guess, to risk, and we want to focus on addressing it, not just managing it. So follow the advice from either one of those sources, and you'll do fine. So we built in, I hope you saw, we built in risk, addressing risk throughout the toolkit. I hit on some highlights, but it's baked in many places, just like governance is as well. In many ways, Discipline Agile is for the true enterprises, for the actual situations that you actually face in your organizations. So I'd invite you to learn more about DA. We've got a lot of great stuff online, as I hope you know. The DA Hub, pmi.org/disciplinagile, has a lot of great material there. There's our DA Basics online workshop, as well as, of course, the certifications as well. So a lot of great stuff, and I hope you choose to learn more. As well, for those of you who are active PMI members, you can download the Choose Your WOW book free of charge as a PDF, just like you can download the standards and guidelines documents from PMI. So if you want a PDF, you can get that free of charge. If you are a paper type of person like I am, or a Kindle version, or like a more of an ebook type of person, and then I believe it's $20 US. So it's still fairly inexpensive, but the PDF version is pretty darn good. So anyway, so thank you very much. We have some time for questions, I hope.
Thank you very much, Scott. Indeed, very interesting insights that you share with us. Let me pick up a question from the chat window. For instance, a video is asking you, he said basically the risk-based milestone, it's a very intriguing concept. Can you expand on that? Can you detail a bit about risk-based milestone? What is that?
Yeah, definitely. So there are several milestones. Actually, you know what? I'll go back. It's easy enough to bring that slide up because it'll make it a bit easier. Okay. So the idea here, so at the top of the slide are the three project phases for an Agile project team: inception, also called Sprint Zero, construction, and transition, sometimes called deployment or release. And the idea here is, instead of saying, so for the stakeholder vision milestone at the end of inception, so you don't leave inception until you've come to an agreement around what the strategy is going to be. And the strategy addresses, what's the schedule, what do you believe the budget's going to be, what do you believe the architecture strategy is going to be, what do you believe the scope of what you're going to deliver is going to be. So it's not based on the schedule. Many project teams will get into trouble because, well, we scheduled inception to last 4 weeks, or we're at the end of week 4, so inception is done. No, it's not done. Maybe you finished a week and a half into that 4 weeks, or maybe you need 1 more week in order to to actually get your act together and figure out what direction you're going in, right? So inception ends when you come to an agreement. So, but notice how it's not defined. It's defined in terms of a risk, right? Do we agree on the strategy? It's not defined as, have we filled out a business plan? Have we filled out a some sort of business case document, and followed this template and did this and did this and did, filled out this document and created this artifact. No, it's not. So there's many different ways that we can come to an agreement, right? I've been involved in multi-million-dollar projects where we literally, we got the stakeholders together in a room for several days where we talked through, what do you actually want to, what do you want? What are your requirements? What, how can we build this? We had technical people in the room as well as business people in the room. We had, we talked about planning, when do you think you want this? How much money are you willing to spend? And we made all those trade-offs together as a team over several days. And we had whiteboards and sticky notes, and we talked it all out, usual stuff, usual Agile stuff, right? And then at the end, SAFe calls this big room planning. This is a technique from Agile modeling from like 20 years ago. But anyways, so it doesn't matter what you call it. So we had all these people together in the room. And then at the end, and I've done this many times. And at the end of that, we do a wall walk, and we say, okay, well, we think this is what we're going to build. This is our strategy we've come up with. We think it's going to be 7 months, and we think it's going to be $3 million. Are we all in agreement? Okay. And that was it. We didn't have to write up a document. We didn't have to get a sign off, and at some point, we took snapshots of we take snapshots of the wall. We might put together a nice slide deck to, to have a record of that, but we don't write up a 50-page business case. I've been in other situations where, we wrote up a 50-page business case because that was appropriate for that situation. So it's about paying down, so in this case, it's about paying down business risk. Are we in agreement? The proven architecture milestone, that's all about paying down technical risk. And we're trying to answer the question, can we actually build this? And there's multiple, I don't have the goal diagram here in front of me, but there's multiple ways that we can do that. We could actually build working, in the case of a software team, build the skeleton, the working skeleton of the system to actually show that, we can actually address the riskiest requirements that we've got, for example. And there's or we could create a big document and review, smart people create a document, smart people review and sign off on it, right? So there's different ways we can do that. But we're not specifying how to, we're specifying, here's the risk, you need to show that you're addressing it. It's based, and so that's what the milestones are about. The milestone reviews are about in this case.
So we want to advance by eliminating risks. It's real progress.
Yeah, either reduce or eliminate. Ideally, eliminate, but more realistically, just reduce to a level that we can live with. It's all about your risk tolerance, right?
Great, thanks, Scott. Another question is coming from Theodore. In your opinion, in the context of DA framework, how do you see the relationship and collaboration between the project manager and DA, Scrum Master role, especially in the risk management area? Who actually owns the risk management process, the PM or DA, Scrum Master?
Well, it depends on the way you've organized your team. So in the workshops, if you take the workshops, I think we're pretty clear that so in DA we have what we call a team lead role, and this is in many ways a placeholder. And so because the idea is that an agile team, an agile continuous delivery team, for example, might have a DA Scrum Master as the team lead. A marketing team will have a marketing manager as a team lead. A project team might have a project manager, hopefully an agile project manager, or just an agile project manager as a team lead. So different types of teams have different types of leads. If you have two leads on a single team, I would suggest not doing that if you can avoid it, because that you're increasing your risk by doing that, I think. But it might be reducing some risks as well, I guess. But the challenge is who's the leader in that case, right? So the issue becomes the team lead, whoever is in the team lead role, and if that's a Scrum, some sort of DA Scrum Master, if it's project manager, or maybe both are sharing the role for some reason, then they would need to work it through. For addressing risk at the team level. But certainly the team is, the overall team is responsible for addressing the risk. Whoever is managing the risk, the team lead will be facilitating and or managing that, depending on your approach.
Okay,
so
thanks. So first, there is no discipline agile Scrum Master role first. Then among the discipline agile roles, the primary roles, the team lead is the closest role to the traditional project manager. So that one would be the facilitator. And risk management or risk addressing task, it's a distributed role among the discipline agile primary roles.
Exactly, and there's and this is something we're going to update in the next release of the Choose Your Wow book. But there's a detailed article on projectmanagement.com explaining the team lead role and how it depending on the way you've configured your team, depending on your context, that might be a Scrum Master in that position. It might be a project manager in that position. So it depends on your team. Yeah. So the teams need to figure these things out. So and the idea with the process goal, so in this case address risk, is all right, because in DA we don't prescribe things, right? What we say is that you really need to consider addressing risk. Here are the things you need to think about. Here are different techniques for doing so. You as a team need to identify how you're going to, to what extent and how you're going to do that. Because I don't know your situation. I can't tell you the exact way of working because I don't know you. I don't know your situation, but you know you. So you can make that decision, and DA will help you to do that and identify the best way for you in your situation.
Thank you, Scott. Another question from Mihai Kotu, which asks, for DA as a toolkit, what are the tools and or approach to deal with technical debt as a risk? Or technical debt is something else or more than risks?
Yeah, okay. So let me, unfortunately, I don't have the details. You'd have to go to the website to see the details in behind this. But right here, one of the process goals is to improve quality. And that is where we have many of our technical, it's basically all about paying down technical debt when it gets down to it, for the most part, or forms of, excuse me, forms of technical debt. And so we go beyond the classic technical debt being a source code issue and get into technical data debt and architecture debt and good stuff like that. We also have built right in the prove architecture early milestone, or not milestone, process goal is all about avoiding technical debt to begin with, as is this identify architecture strategy process goal as well, right? So think before you act. Avoid technical debt to begin with is a primary issue. But then when you run into technical debt, improve quality has the techniques to pay it down. The enterprise architecture process blade, so at this level, so the enterprise architecture blade in the top left corner here is, in some aspects of it, is all about avoiding technical debt at, one aspect of effective enterprise architecture is to avoid incurring technical debt at the enterprise level, or to be more accurate, to make intelligent decisions around what technical debt you will incur at the enterprise level. So it's so paying down avoiding and paying down technical debt is throughout the toolkit is the short answer.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? You can open the video and audio channel to address your question directly to Scott if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to do it. Is the same question on technical debt. You, Scott, said about addressing, not managing the debt. And I'm looking more pragmatic approach on technical debt. And in my case, is not the manager managing the debt, is actually the technical people addressing the debt, being the architect, security, ops, and infrastructure, and so on.
Yep.
And in my mind, technical debt need to be solved on the team level. It's too late to address it only on enterprise level.
I would disagree with that. Certainly at the team level, it has to be dealt with. But frankly, I'm sure you've been on teams where your manager says, "Oh, we don't have time to do that. There's no funding." Right. So if it's not understood and addressed at the enterprise level, as well as, like, obviously the team's got to deal, they're going to do the real work of paying down, of either avoiding or paying down that technical debt. But if it's not being addressed at higher levels, you'll never get to pay it down. You'll never, you might be able to sneak some stuff in, but there'll never be time given to you to do that sort of stuff.
In my case, I have the funding. 20% of my budget is spent on technical debt.
So somebody must have made that decision, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So this is one of the challenges that we have. We need to look at the full picture, right? So so it's not, and maybe you weren't around when that decision got made, But yeah, somebody had to make that decision, and that was an intelligent trade-off that they made, because they're deciding, hey, we're putting that budget towards paying down tech debt as opposed to building new stuff. So somebody had to have understood what, I hope, had to have understood why they needed to make that decision, right? So, and that could have been driven by enterprise architects for all I know.
Yeah, and they help
Or maybe your
also.
portfolio management folks.
Yes.
They could help also with reuse engineering, the enterprise architect, to help the teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Got it.
And
thank you.
If you want to pay the debts, maybe from the lesson learned, your team could learn to avoid the debt and stop producing.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I didn't point it out, but asset management, which is where reuse engineering is. If you do asset management properly, that is a play to avoid technical debt, because the more reusable assets that we have that we can take advantage of, then we're not, creating new copies of things, and we're not, reinventing the wheel. Because, whenever, if I, go and build a new version of something we already have, I've just increased the technical debt, right? Or if I go out and buy, something we already have, I've just increased the technical debt. So, and those sorts of decisions tend to be higher level. Certainly that, certainly at the team level, they're involved, but if you're not supporting enterprise architecture, if you're not supporting asset management, you generally don't pull it off very well in most organizations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you to Mihai for your question. Any other questions? What I can tell you, Mihai, there is a lot of guidance in the discipline Agile, choose your way of working. So it's not only about the process and the goals, but the guidance. This is the key word in this document approach. You are guided, really guided, including on the improve quality process. Okay, so last call. Any other questions? Last question. Take advantage of being here, Scott.
Oh, okay then.
Scott, if you can explain just a little how could help for solution development, use the concept of consumable solution instead of just working software.
Oh, yeah.
Risk management.
Yeah. So great question. Yeah. So in discipline, so originally in the Agile community, the focus was on working software, working software over comprehensive documentation. And, fair enough. That was a great idea. But it was pretty easy to observe that it's not just about software. Like even on a hardcore software development team, it's certainly not just about software. Your software runs on hardware. It has supporting documentation that gets, or some artifacts get released as well. You have you often change the business processes around the usage of your system. You often change the organization structure of the people who use the system, and this might take time. This all happens over time. So it's not really just about software, it's about solutions. And it's not just about working solutions or working software, it's really about being consumable. And what we mean by consumable, it has to be functional, it has to be working, of course, but it also has to be usable. So, difficult stuff, something that's difficult to use probably won't get used. And it has to be attractive. People have to want to buy it, they have to want to use it. A lot of great systems that, look at go to the App Store for your phone. There are tens of thousands of apps, most of which aren't being used, right? Or they have a very small user base and only a handful are really, being used. And those are the consumable ones. Those are the ones that people want, right? I'm sure there's some great apps that only have 50 users, but nobody else wants them, right? So they're not really succeeding in the marketplace as a result because they're not consumable, they're not desirable. So in DA, we focus on, the overall picture. It's, let's focus on consumable solutions, not just on working software. And this will dramatically potentially help you to reduce your risk, because of this focus on, well, wait a minute, how do people, what do people actually want? What do they want to buy? How are they going to use this? So what's going to happen in the marketplace? How can we experiment in the marketplace, and how can we get feedback and react to the marketplace? So we really want these consumable solutions, and the more consumable our solutions are, the lower business risk we've got, the lower the risk that we built the wrong thing, basically, or bought or configured the wrong thing. So it's, so arguably that's very clearly, I think that's a risk, risk mitigation strategy, is focusing on consumable solutions, not just working software. So we're upping our game and we're making it clear and explicit. So anyways, something to consider.
Thanks again. Another question from a video. When we say reducing risk, aren't we assuming risks are more of a negative?
Yes. Yeah, that's my, I apologize for that. Yeah, I should really be saying reducing negative risks and increasing positive risks. So yeah, it's an unfortunate habit on my end, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's all about reducing negative risks.
Right. Indeed. Thanks. Okay. Great session.
My pleasure. So should I invite the next speaker?
Yes. Let me. Okay. So that's the slide.
Yeah. So I would like to invite Dan Bergelia. Probably mispronouncing that. I would like to invite Dan tomorrow evening on I guess it would be April 23rd to walk through the basics of Monte Carlo simulations with us. It sounds like it's going to be a great topic.
Yeah. So you can see the connection with today's topic about risk management, right? So
yeah, definitely.
Right. Thank you very much, Scott, for the hands-off. I gladly accept the baton, and I'm looking forward to cross the finish line tomorrow evening with all of you guys. So just looking forward for the next meeting tomorrow.
Thank you, Daniel.
Fantastic.
And thank you too, Scott, very much for your time and for your great presentation and
insights. Hopefully we will have you again.
Of course, in May, 25th of May.
Oh, it's quite too soon.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, all of you, for your attendance, for your questions, for your interest. And we are waiting for you for the next and the last episode of this marathon tomorrow, same hour, same place. Thank you, and have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Scott. Bye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.